Welcome to Too Fond of Books. My name is Janelle, and this is my wrap-up for Victober. Week 4 reading plus wrap-up. I really enjoyed participating in Victober this past month. I read some good books. I'm still reading some good books, and I'm going to talk about that, as well as a couple of new books that arrived late, so I didn't get a chance to read them, but I will be reading them soon, and I wanted to show them to you because they're pretty awesome. So first, though, I just thought we're preparing for a blizzard here in Saskatchewan. It's a little early in this season, which is why I think there is such a, kerfuffle going on. It's apparently going to be quite a blizzard. They're calling for record-breaking snowfall this weekend, blizzard conditions which will restrict travel, potential power outages. They're suggesting that, you get your generator ready and have candles and flashlights and all of that. And so I just thought I would share with you what it's like to live in southern Saskatchewan because today is Friday when I'm filming this video. Yesterday, it was 20 degrees Celsius, which is 68 Fahrenheit. By Sunday, they're calling for -3 degrees Celsius, feels like -11 because we have something called a wind chill factor up here, fabulous, which is 26 degrees Fahrenheit and feels like 12. So within the span of 4 days, or 3 days, we're going from 68 degrees Fahrenheit to 28 degrees Fahrenheit, but feels like 12. And that's pretty standard to have such wide-ranging variations in temperature. For the blizzard, they're calling for between 30 and maybe 50 centimeters of snow, so like 12 to 16 inches in a day or two, with wind gusts of 70 kilometers an hour, which is like 43 miles per hour. So we're preparing to hunker down for the weekend. We've got food in, we've got candles and flashlights, and yeah, so I just thought I'd share that because yeah, that's what's going on over here. Okay, so I wanted to show you my Victober Bingo card because earlier I showed you I had a bingo, but I've also got 2 more. So I've got a bingo here and I got a bingo here. I was super excited to be able to cross off this references Robinson Crusoe because I didn't think that I was going to. And in discussions with some other people participating in Victober, I discovered that the books that they were reading had references to Robinson Crusoe as well. So, can somebody please tell me in the comment section down below, why is it that Victorian authors liked to reference Robinson Crusoe, which is a Victorian story? Right? I don't understand why that one in specific. It's mentioned a lot in The Moonstone by Wilkie Collings. It was mentioned in a ghost story that I'm going to tell you about here in a minute, as well as other books that I heard about from other participants in Victober. So why Robinson Crusoe? That's my question. All right, so let's get on with it. I finished Shirley by Charlotte Bronte. This was okay. I gave it 3 stars. It was nice. It's just not my favorite. I just didn't really connect. I would have loved to see more of the problems with the mill, that whole social history, the politics of the industrialization and what it did to people and how it affected people. I would have loved to see more of that. That was in here, but I think I would have enjoyed the story more if there was more of that. So I gave it 3 stars. It was good. I liked it. Shirley, it's called Shirley, in case you're wondering, because Shirley herself does not actually appear until like almost halfway through the book. It's called Shirley because she's the catalyst in this story for so much of what happens. I read Detection by Gaslight, 14 Victorian detective stories. And I discovered that that's not entirely true. There's actually 3 or 4 Edwardian detective stories, and I'm not entirely sure why they felt they needed to do that. I am sure that they could have found 14 actual Victorian detective stories, but I wanted to tell you about a couple of them here at the end. So there was a G.K. Chesterton story in here, which I'm not going to talk about because it doesn't count as Victorian, it's totally Edwardian. However, there was something in this description of G.K. Chesterton that I wanted to read to you because it was awesome. G.K. Chesterton was one of the greatest men of letters of his age. Poet, essayist, novelist, editor, and creator of the immortal Father Brown. I do really like the Father Brown stories. He was a huge man, wearing a flapping hat, carrying a sword stick, and of prodigious absent-mindedness. He once telegraphed his wife, "Am in Market Harborough. Where ought I to be?" Brilliant, right? Okay, so moving along to an actual Victorian story. I read Robert W. Chambers' The Purple Emperor, which was published in a short story collection in 1897, so it counts. It's set in France, has a lot to do with butterfly collecting, which I found interesting, but the story itself was only okay. I don't know, I'm not entirely sure why, but yeah, I didn't love it super much. Then there's also the story of, there's a Jacques Futrelle story in here, which also doesn't count. It is Edwardian. However, I wanted to tell you a little bit about Jacques Futrelle because he's a really interesting writer. So he's famous for inventing, or his character, the thinking man. Jacques Futrelle was born in Georgia, but spent most of his working life as a newspaperman in Boston. His relatively short life ended when he was returning from Europe on the Titanic. He pushed his wife and child onto a life raft and went down with the ship. In 1905, he created the most important detective character in American literature between the time of Poe's C. Auguste Dupin and Melville Davisson Post's Uncle Abner. Professor S.F.X. Van Dusen, known as the Thinking Machine, first appeared in The Problem of Cell 13, in which he escapes from a locked and guarded cell. So the story in this book is called The Tragedy of the Life Raft. It has never appeared in a Futrelle collection. It is one of 4 Thinking Machine stories Futrelle left behind when he traveled to Europe. That it has to do with a shipwreck and even uses the word Titanic must be put down to coincidence. Very interesting, hey? All right, and then we have E. and H. Heron, the story of Balebro. And this was actually more of a ghost story, so I thought that was interesting. Sherlock Holmes once remarked that at his agency, ghosts need not apply, and in general, it is true that the detective story requires a rational, material explanation of the mystery. Occasionally, however, writers have used the investigatory techniques of the detective to confirm the supernatural. Probably the first series of such occult detective stories was Real Ghost Stories, 12 Tales by the mother and son team of Kate and Hesketh Pritchard. That's who E. and H. Heron are. Published in Pearson's magazine beginning in January 1898. Although the Pritchards looked on the stories as pure fiction, the magazine claimed that they described genuine events investigated by Flaxman Lowe. The publisher explained, under the thin disguise of which name many are sure to recognize one of the leading scientists of the day. Each story included a photograph of the supposedly haunted house. The stories were collected the next year under the title Ghosts. And so this one, they think there's a ghost in the house, and there's an Egyptian collection, and so of course there is a mummy involved. So yeah, I enjoyed reading Detection by Gaslight, and although I really enjoy, for the most part, the Edwardian authors that are included in here, they really should have been in their own separate, Edwardian detective stories book, and then those could have been replaced with more Victorian detective stories. And I read 8 or 10 ghost stories from classic Victorian and Edwardian ghost stories selected by Rex Collings. This was really fun. This was in preparation for the series that I did of Victorian ghost stories, and I'll put that in the cards up here if you have not yet listened to a Victorian ghost story. There was a ghost story in here by Elizabeth Gaskell, which was fun. A couple by Charles Dickens, and then some kind of unfamiliar writers to me. And then there was also one by Wilkie Collins, which was great. The Traveler's Story of a Terribly Strange Bed. He has that set in France. And this guy goes, he wants to go gambling. They go to a place to gamble, and he does really well, and he wins a lot of money. By the end of the evening, he is super drunk, and so someone that he meets at the hotel says, well, I've got a room here, I can hook you up with a room here, you can stay here instead of like traveling in so late at night with so much money. And he discovers that the room that he is given in has been set up, the bed it's a 4-poster with a canopy, and the canopy starts to lower, and so he discovers that this has been like a setup where you know, they lower the canopy on the unsuspecting victims who have been drugged and suffocate them essentially to death, and then steal their winnings. So hey, great idea for easy money, right? Anyway, that was really enjoyable. I'm continuing to read Elizabeth Gaskell's Wives and Daughters. I'm taking it slow because I am really enjoying this reading and I don't want to rush through it. It's the story of Molly Gibson, who is the doctor's daughter in the village, and the people that she meets, and her relationship with her new stepmother and her new stepsister. Her dad is great, Dr. Gibson. I really like his sarcastic sense of humor, and I am just really enjoying Wives and Daughters. I also started Queen Victoria by Lucy Worsley, 24 Days That Changed Her Life, and I'm continuing to read this throughout the month of November, which is great because it'll totally fit for nonfiction November. I did want to share a couple of things. So I read the chapter on the coronation, which was really interesting, a chapter in Lady Flora's bedchamber. So really early in her reign, she kind of came upon an issue that affected how the public perceived her, and she didn't necessarily deal with it very well. And so I thought that was a really interesting chapter. It had a lot to do with her relationship with Lord Melbourne and how much she let him affect her decisions and her behavior. Then there was the chapter on the proposal with Prince Albert. I'm going to flip to that because that's where I want to talk about this. So I think unsurprisingly, because she's the queen, she actually was the one who proposed to Albert, which is interesting. But then there was this little bit about Albert himself and his role in all of this, which I found so fascinating. The biographer A.N. Wilson points out that British historians writing about the 19th century ritually compare the small geographical size of German states like Coburg to English counties with the purpose of belittling them. And what Albert had to offer wasn't really his background in Coburg, even though his home state had an impressive reputation among its peers for being forward-thinking. Instead, Albert's qualifications as a queen's husband were his pure, ancient blood and his beautiful face and body. In this, he was fulfilling the conventional role of a princess in a royal marriage. At 5'7", he was just the right amount taller than Victoria. In modern times, people might worry about the genetic consequences of first cousins mating, but in a century when people believed that they could only marry within their social class, the pool of potential spouses was smaller. For royalty, the pool was a puddle, and needs must. It would be impossible for Victoria to find a socially acceptable suitor to whom she wasn't in some way related. So I found that so fascinating that they just came out and said it, that Albert was playing the role of the princess in this scenario. So fascinating. So let's get to the couple of books that I received or that I got for Victober, but not in time to read for Victober. And one is Black Swine in the Sewers of Hampstead. Beneath the Surface of Victorian Sensationalism by Thomas Boyle. I am super excited that I found this. I got it off of Better World Books. It's so interesting. The premise is so interesting. So this was published in 1989, and it's basically about sensational fiction in Victorian times, which I find fascinating. In this startling investigation of crime and sexuality in Victorian culture, Thomas Boyle exposes the dark corners of a society notorious for its smug prudery and repressive official consciousness. Drawing on newspaper, police, and court reports, he illuminates the Victorian fascination with shocking crimes, an interest mirrored and exploited in the best-selling sensation novels of Wilkie Collings, Mary Elizabeth Braddon, Charles Dickens, and others, whose works deal freely with murder, insanity, and other unsavory topics. The popularity of sensationalism in both newspaper journalism and fiction, Boyle argues, marks the beginning of a decidedly subversive counter-consciousness. It heralded a new age of skepticism and experimentation in life, thought, and art, and paved the way to the 20th century. So, very interesting, and this is a great option for Nonfiction November. And then finally, I got this from my parents for my birthday, and I am so very excited. It is Wilkie Collins, The Legacy of Cain. I don't know if you're going to be able to see that. This is published by Peter Fenelon Collier, and from what I was able to look up, because there's no copyright information, I believe that this was published in 1900, but I'm not entirely sure. The book was written in 1888, and it explores the theme of hereditary evil and attacks the idea that bad blood necessarily results in criminality. It was the last book completed by Wilkie Collins, and I am so excited to have this book, and I will definitely be reading it very soon. It's mainly narrated by the prison governor, who always feared the adoption of the child born to an executed murderess would end badly because of the taint of inherited evil. So I find the theme super fascinating. I love Wilkie Collins, and I am so excited to have this beautiful copy of The Legacy of Cain. So that's been my Victober. I have loved, like I said, participating. So thank you to the hosts for all the great videos that they put out this month. And that's it for me. So I gotta go hunker down and get ready for this blizzard. And I will see you for another video soon. Bye.